This video is for entertainment and educational purposes only. All right, motherfuckers, this is the one that you guys have all been asking for. I've had so many people ask me, and although it's all in other videos, but I've had a bunch of people ask me, how did I put on 50 pounds of stage weight in 1 year? What was the secret sauce? I don't know that there is one thing I can point my finger to, but I'm going to go through everything that I did over the last year, how I did it, my theories on why I put on the weight I did. To be honest with you, some of it's a mystery to me too, but I did try to do everything perfectly this past year, and I think that's a huge part of it. A big aspect that a lot of people don't realize is being compliant with the diet. I went pretty much the entire off season and treated it like contest prep. I didn't deviate. I followed my coach's plan. I ate the food that I was supposed to eat, weighed it, measured everything, didn't skip workouts, didn't half-ass workouts, took planned deloads. I followed a structured plan. I didn't take a vacation from training. I think a lot of bodybuilders will do this shit where they cram all of it in contest prep like they're studying for a test the night before. Instead of preparing in the off season, and I actually prepared in the off season, and I got a good rebound. So I think that's a big part of it. But anyway, I'm going to dig into all the details. I'll go through all the phases, what I changed, what I did differently, and you can make your own judgments and assessments on what it was. We can talk about it in the comment section. Anyway, we're going to dig into it in just 1 second. All right, so I have my progress pics up from 2021 to 2022. The time frame between the two picks was 10 months. It wasn't even a year, so it wasn't even a full year between each. And I weighed in at 184 pounds at my show last year, the Jay Cutler Classic in Richmond, Virginia. And this year at the DC Pro-Am, I weighed in, I think it was 235.9, so we'll just say 236. If you want the official weight, I think it's on the NPC website. But I was up 52 pounds in 1 year. You can see here from my front pose, it's not as evident from the front pose. I definitely put some size on my legs, shoulders, arms. I mean, everything's just bigger. Here is the side profile. Here's where you can really see I added thickness to my physique, especially in my legs. My legs were very stringy and small. I was naturally a skinny guy when I was younger. I did go through kind of a fat kid phase in middle school, but I played basketball. I was like 175, 180 pounds when I graduated high school, something like that. I was pretty skinny when I graduated high school and when I went to college. And I started lifting weights, I think my senior year in high school, somewhere around that time. And I really didn't get much bigger at the beginning. I think I might have graduated college 10 pounds heavier than what I was when I went to high school. So, but on the left is kind of my default state. I think that's just how I look normally when I'm in my skinny mode. And here you can see the rear progress pics where I really, really added some size to my back, my glutes, my hamstrings. I really focused on bringing up my glutes and hamstrings and back thickness. And you can see it here from the 2021 pic to the 2022 pics. So anyway, that shows you really the progress that I made, and that it's real progress. It's real muscle. It's not bloat. In fact, I think I was probably leaner this year, in better condition than I was last year. So there were a lot of things that changed. One of the things I actually heard on a recent Blood, Sweat, and Gear podcast on the Think Big Bodybuilding on their channel. Scott McNally and Skip Hill were talking about me, and Skip had brought up that he thought that I was probably over dieted from a show last year, which he's correct. That is what happened. his assessment was pretty spot on about what happened with the show last year. I know that he said that in the podcast. I hope he didn't offend me. There was nothing in there to offend me. If you're listening, Skip, you were right on about everything. I did over diet last year. I probably should have been more like 200, maybe 210 on stage. I still put on a lot of good quality weight this year, but last year, Skip was right. I did have something to prove. I was on a mission to get as ripped as possible. And I talked to my coach, Justin Harris, about it, and he said, worst case scenario, we're going to have a great rebound coming out of this, but let's push it as hard as we can push it. So it was a conscious decision to push that hard, and I went too far. I know where too far is now. I have that problem. I know some people have that problem. We are an uncommon company. Most people, I have to push to get weight off of them. But when I do things, I go all in to my own detriment sometimes. I push too hard. I only know one way to do things, and that's with the gas pedal all the way down to the floor. And sometimes I have to moderate myself and pull myself back. So I just took a smarter approach to prep this year. I did more food, less fat burners, less drugs. Just changed a bunch of stuff. So pushing hard was a choice. I wanted to be the most ripped I've ever been in my life, which, I was skinny. It's hard to tell from those pictures because the lighting sucked, but I was absolutely peeled to the bone. Although this year when I had a DEXA scan done the week before my show, and it read out at 4.75%. I don't know how accurate those things are. I don't trust those things, but I was definitely lean at my show this year and carrying a lot more muscle. But I was over depleted last year, so in fairness, I started from an over depleted state. So if I had done a normal diet or something similar to what I did this year, I probably would have had it like 25, 30 pounds of stage weight. But that's still pretty crazy progress when you think about it. One of the big things, I just made an overall philosophy change. I am an introspective person. I like to take a step back, analyze things, probably sometimes too much, but I like to see where I can improve, what I could have done better, and I make those changes. And usually when I do those changes, I commit to them. I think some people overanalyze too much and they flip-flop all the time. I will say this: if you're going to make a change, commit to it for a period of time. It's a big lesson I have learned. When you're constantly bouncing back and forth from one thing to the other, you never really get any solid progress. So I did make a philosophy change, and I stuck to that philosophy all off-season and decided to follow a science-first approach, not the old-school bro logic that you have to do a bro split, that you have to do everything to failure on this, just how old school bro school cycles, the whole fear of insulin and that insulin is deadly. I just took an objective look at everything and used a science-based approach, and I wanted to hit every pathway I possibly could for hypertrophy in the most efficient way possible. That was my plan going into the off season, and I started with training, and I'll go into it in a second. But it's scientifically proven that training for hypertrophy, I want it is high volume training is the most effective. But I want it to follow what science says, not what bro science says. Rebound and reverse dieting, that's another thing I think is just a bunch of hooey. People come out of shows and they do these stupid reverse diets and they're scared of getting fat after a show. The reason why people get fat after a show, I'll tell you, is because they drop all their gear, they drop all their fat burners, and they start eating like shit, and they stop training. That's why. It's not because they didn't reverse diet. It's because they ate like assholes, they stopped training, and they had a hormonal crash. It's that simple. So I wanted to avoid the hormone crash after the show, and I wanted to eat in a decent way, treat it more like the off-season. I wanted to take a smarter approach to anabolics, safe, stick with safer, it's relative, and proven compounds that work, and don't come off. I don't know why guys come off after shows. It's the worst time to come off. Your body is in a depleted state. I would think anabolics would be helpful in moderation to heal and get your body back into a good spot. Get off the harsh shit. Stick with the stuff that's going to heal you and get yourself back into a good spot. with hormones and with your body composition. Fully leveraging insulin. People treat insulin like it's the boogeyman, but I wanted to use insulin intelligently and use it as a tool to increase feed efficiency so I could eat more food and put that food to actual use. Diet as well. With diet, I wanted to take a smart approach with diet, and I wanted to follow an approach that made the most sense for physique competition. And I look at diets as like a tool in the toolbox. There are many different tools, many different diets that you can use for different purposes, different objectives. But in my research, I came to the conclusion that a high carbohydrate, moderate protein, low fat diet is the most effective for physique competitors. That may not be the case for your sport. That may not be the case for your goals. So don't get pissed off when I say it. But for my objective of stepping on stage with the most amount of muscle and that muscle being full, this made the most sense. So the training change, to go into detail, I decided, when you look at the studies, and people get their feelings hurt over this one. Everybody is so married to HIIT training, to progressive overload training, to all these established dogmas in bodybuilding that really have no basis in science, but there have been a mountain of studies now. It's not just one, it's not just two. There is metadata now that shows that hypertrophy is most effective when you are doing high frequency, high volume training with moderate intensity. It's just shown, so I tell guys you can choose high intensity or you can choose high volume. You can't do high volume, high frequency. You can't do both at the same time. So if you're going to do high intensity, you need to do less volume, you need to do less frequency. If you want to do high frequency, high volume, you have to do less intensity. You have to ratchet one up and one down. You can't do both at the same time. And I give you the example, I don't know, bodybuilders seem to train like idiots compared to every other athlete. I don't know why this is. They don't follow the science. They don't follow any established protocol. When you look at, I give you the example of powerlifters. Powerlifters are very structured and have figured out what works. And a lot of it is science-based, and most powerlifters follow the same plan. Powerlifters have figured out what works. They periodize their training. Bodybuilders almost never periodize their training, which blows me away. They slowly ratchet up intensity, and then they back off. They slowly ratchet up intensity, they back off. They don't train to failure either. This is another well-established dogma in bodybuilding, is that you have to train to failure and beyond to get hypertrophy. And a lot of times what you're doing is digging yourself into a fatigue hole. Really, all that's necessary for hypertrophy is a novel stimulus. That's it. Doing a little bit more than what you were doing before. And sometimes that novel stimulus can be the same for weeks on end, and then that wears out eventually. The example I heard Dr. Mike Israetel give that I liked is like reading a passage in a book. You read it the first time and you learn something new. That's a novel stimulus. You can read that same passage 4 or 5 times and reinforce what you have learned. There comes a point when it becomes ineffective, but you don't have to read a new passage every time for that passage to be effective. It's the same thing with stimulus in bodybuilding. Powerlifters they never train to failure when you think about it. Almost never. They're very specific in their approach. There's no wasted exercises. They focus on the exercises that are important to the success of their sport. That's it. I see bodybuilders all the time. They can't make up their mind. They want to be a CrossFitter. They want to be a bodybuilder. They want to be a power lifter, and they mix a little bit of everything in there. When you do all of these things, you end up doing none of them well. That's what happens. And powerlifters are hugely focused on perfecting their form so they can move the weight from point A to point B efficiently. I don't know why bodybuilders don't focus on form for stimulating hypertrophy. The ones that figure it out do, But most dudes are just slinging weights around, trying to get things up and down, and they think they're kind of training like a bodybuilder, kind of training like a power lifter, and they're really doing neither. I see it all the time. I see you dudes on the calf raises with 8 plates when you have 13-inch calves. That's the guy I'm talking about. The guy trying to do partial reps with 100-pound dumbbells on shoulder presses. You know, you're only getting half the range of motion. You're not actually stimulating any muscle growth. So I took a step back. I wanted a program designed for hypertrophy. I wanted my form to be specific for hypertrophy. I wanted to train specifically for my sport. And the most important thing for my training, number 1, is to stimulate hypertrophy. Number 2 for me was not to get hurt. That's why I don't do deadlifts. That's why I don't do squats. If I can't train, I can't grow. So I kicked both of those to the curb. I know it baffles people when I tell them this, but no squats, no deadlifts, no bench presses in my program. And I didn't train to failure during this whole period of time. So that blows a lot of dogma, a lot of well-established bro myths out of the water that you have to squat, deadlift, and bench to get big. I put on 50 pounds without doing any of them. Diet philosophy. You know, I've talked about it before, but a high-carb approach makes the most sense for physique athletes. Carbs fuel weight training and performance. Carbs keep your glycogen stores full, which we want that full, bubbly look for our muscles. Carbs are protein sparing. You don't have to eat as much protein when you're eating carbs. Carbs are cheaper to buy than protein. Carbs are easier on your digestive tract than eating a bunch of meat. I do a moderate protein. Most bodybuilders drastically overeat protein. You hear dudes, at least back in the early 2000s, late 90s, it was 2 grams of protein per pound of body weight, which now that I think about it is absolutely insane. You don't need that much protein to stimulate muscle protein synthesis, and any excess protein that you eat just ends up getting turned back into carbohydrates anyway. So all you're doing by eating that extra protein is just buying really expensive, hard to digest carbohydrates. So you're just wasting your money. And you're causing extra stress to your stomach that is unnecessary. Low fats. Most people drastically overeat fats. I love when I coach people and they say, well, you need fats for hormone production. I'm like, dude, you're on fucking exogenous hormones. You know, how much fat do you really need? And plus, you don't need that many anyway. It is literally, if you look up the science on it and look up the research on it, the amount of EFAs that you need for proper hormone production and cholesterol is in the grams. It is nothing. Most people have that enough in for the day by the time they eat breakfast. So, and when you're doing higher carbohydrate, your body prefers carbs for fuel. And if you're doing high fat along with it, what ends up happening is the majority of that fat just ends up being stored as adipose tissue. So you're just wasting at those extra calories, and it's just more fat you have to burn off when it comes contest prep time. So I use added EFAs because the EFAs are important. You can't get those, your body can't make those themselves, so you have to get them from a dietary source. We probably go a little over with it, but it's still very low fat. It's probably like 10% of my calories come from fat. Insulin use daily. This is another one. That people get terrified of insulin, and I'm not telling you should take insulin. This is your journey. You have to figure this out for yourself. This is another one that it's irrational to me. And dudes are absolutely terrified of eating or using insulin, but they have no problem with taking Tren. They have no problem with taking Anadrol. They have no problem with using diuretics, which people actually die from on contest prep, but they're scared the fuck of insulin. If you can do math and you're eating enough carbs, insulin is relatively safe. So insulin is also a very, very, very strong tool for leveraging food partitioning, or nutrient uptake. So And if you use insulin properly, you actually get a better body composition. A lot of people use it incorrectly and just end up getting fat. It's probably because they're eating too many fats with it. They're not matching their insulin use to their blood glucose. They're just jamming a bunch of insulin and then taking whatever food in they need to eat to keep from going hypo, which is the stupid way to do it. I think the whole pre and post workout way of taking insulin is just dumb. I'm not going to get into that here, but I have an entire video series up on insulin use if you want to go look at my protocol. But this past off season, I used insulin every single day. I used Lantus every day and Humalog to fill in the gaps on my high carbohydrate days. This allowed me to eat a large amount of carbohydrates and actually uptake and partition those correctly, put them where they needed to go. I was proactive about managing my insulin sensitivity using berberine and metformin. Guys get terrified with insulin that they're going to get the GH bubble gut. I had no such thing at my contest. I had one of the tightest stomachs on stage. And the reason so is because I managed my insulin sensitivity. The reason why a lot of dudes end up with the bubble gut is because they're insulin resistant and they are accumulating a ton of visceral fat. They're probably eating like shit in the off season, would be my guess. Eating way too many fats. And then those fats do not, since insulin sensitivity is shot, those fats do not get stored correctly and they end up as visceral fat. And then you have these big old bubble guts and their livers are probably inflamed from taking oral steroids all off season, which is another thing I think is a waste. But take a look at my insulin playlist if you want to see my full protocol. The 2021 Rebound Phase, I managed that properly. I did a 6-week rebound, and I think I went from something like 185 up to 230. Most people really screw up the post-contest phase. I have a full video up on that, too, if you want to go into it. They come off gear, they stop cardio, they stop training hard, they come off the fat burners cold turkey, and what do you think happens when you do all that? You have a huge hormone crash, and then you just get fat. Your hunger takes over because your estrogen rebound happens, and your estrogen goes through the roof, and you get super fucking hungry. Your metabolism crashes because you come off the fat burners cold turkey instead of tapering them down. You have no anabolics in your system, so your testosterone level is probably fucking zero. And what ends up happening is you just set up an environment to accumulate a bunch of fat quickly. It's not because you didn't reverse diet. It's because your hormones are all fucked up. And your metabolism's all fucked up. So you have to back out of a contest prep cycle properly. And what I'll do is run like half the gear that I normally do on contest prep. Last year, I ran 500 tests, 300 NPP, 6 units of GH. I ran Lantus every day and Humalog on my high days. I didn't do that stupid-ass reverse diet that a lot of people like to do. I've never understood that. Either you're the most insulin sensitive after a show, and because of that, if you are eating properly, not eating a bunch of saturated fats and garbage, but if you're eating real food, keeping a low-fat, high-carbohydrate diet and leveraging insulin properly, you should push all those carbs back into the muscle. You know, it's a prime environment for growth. Or it could be a prime environment for getting fat if you don't do things correctly. So that sort of set the stage for my whole off season. If you fuck that up, you're screwed going into your off season. A lot of times I see dudes that come out of contests, they get fat, and then they have to spend another 6 or 8 weeks dumping off some of the fat that they gained from the post-contest thing, and then they've lost valuable time for the off season. Their off season's fucked at that point, and you can't gain any weight. In fact, that's probably most people. I did a 6-week cruise after my rebound phase. I just ran 250 tests, 4 units of GH, continued the Lantus, no Humalog. I gained a little bit of additional size on the cruise because I keep training hard when I'm on cruise. A lot of people, when they go on cruise, they stop training. And they stop eating right. I use this time to normalize my body. I let myself get healthy. This is the time when you back off. I don't come off gear completely. I've never understood why guys think it's productive to come off for 6 or 8 weeks, when a lot of times those long-acting esters are still in your system, and really all you're doing is creating a hormonal crash, and then you're going back on about the time that you're starting to normalize anyway, so why the fuck are you coming off completely? I did take an entire week off of training and from dieting during my cruise last year, and I'll probably do the same this year to take a vacation and just recharge. My 2021 off season was shorter than what I would have liked. Normally I like to run a 16 to 20 week off season, but the contest I chose was earlier in the year, so I didn't have much time. So I ran a 12-week off season. I gradually increased my gear during the off season. I usually pyramid up my gear. I don't throw the kitchen sink out of the gate. I don't do any of this front-loaded idiocy that I see people do. You're the most sensitive to the hormones at the beginning of a cycle, so why do you need to throw more at it? Just get the most out of the least. The time that you need more is at the end, when myostatin rises and your body is becoming more resistant to the hormones. That's when you need more. So I started off with 500 tests, 300 EQ, 6 units of GH at the beginning of my cycle, and I finished with 750 tests, 600 EQ, 150 NPP, and 6 units of GH. So I started off at around 800 milligrams, ended up at around 1.5 grams at the end. Of course, I ran my insulin then there too. I did 2 5-week training blocks of my high volume training, and that was my off season. I did a cruise going into the contest prep, 6-week cruise going into contest prep, and then we kicked the contest prep up. So for the contest prep, I did a 16-week contest prep, which is typically what I do. This year I did not use T3. I used way too much T3 last year, and I think T3 does nothing but melt muscle, and unless your metabolism is really shitty, you probably don't need it. I used less Tren this year because Tren makes it so I can't sleep, and I feel like shit, and I'm anxious, and if you can't sleep, you probably aren't healthy, you probably aren't recovering from your workouts properly, and you're already stressed during contest prep anyway. So I only ran 50 milligrams of Tren every other day this year. I've heard people told me that was impossible. I programmed in 2 deloads during my contest prep this year to manage stress, to let my body pull off some fatigue. I did them at week 10 and week 5. And then really peak week was sort of a deload as well. I did just walking for cardio this year. No HIIT cardio. I'm sorry, Justin. I just didn't do it. I felt like the HIIT cardio melted my muscle off. I know Justin believes it's more effective, and it probably is for most people, but I'm a skinny guy naturally, and I think it's probably too much for me. And I just did a better job of managing my stress. You can see my whole contest prep cycle right here. I started off at 675 milligrams of total gear load, and then I ended up around 2.3 at the end. So contest prep is the time when you're going to throw the kitchen sink at it. I did not use Winstrol this year. That was actually incorrect on this. I subbed out Halotestin for Winstrol this year. So, take that out. Everything else was the same, though. All right, guys, that's it. That's what I did. That was my whole time from contest last year to here. The one big thing I can point the finger at is I used a smart scientific approach. I was consistent. I didn't miss workouts. I followed the diet. I didn't deviate from the diet. I can count the number of times I had a unscheduled cheat or meal missed during that whole period of time on one hand. I fucked up once in a while, but it was very, very infrequent. I treated my off season like a contest prep. And that's really it. I wish I could point to some magic, but I definitely think the insulin made a big difference. I definitely think the high volume training made a big difference. And I definitely think being strict and disciplined with my diet made a difference. So that's it. Let me know what you think in the comment section below. For coaching or consultations, head over to www.anabolicbodybuilding.com to book your spot today. I can help you with optimizing hormones, fat loss, muscle gain, physique, athletic performance, nutrition, and health. For more information, shoot me an email at bigp3rd@gmail.com.